All right, Shabbosai, good morning, Baruch Hashem. What a tremendous, first of all, beautiful to hear the sounds of Zara from Shavuos, Baruch Hashem, emanating in our base medrash, and it is a tremendous zechus, a tremendous and beautiful zechus to be able to begin Meseches Avoda Zara, Mirat Hashem, here together this morning. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilsa Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan Haba Aleinu Latova, Stephen Terry Zin, in loving memory of Steve's mother, Doris Zin Devora Bas Rabbi Shmuel Yoel, on the occasion of her 5th yard site. Our week of learning sponsors, Israel is actually quite beautiful, with anonymous gratitude to the encouragement for starting to do Daf Yomi over 2,700 days ago from Meseches Avoda Zara, and celebrating and starting round 2. All right, so whoever this anonymous sponsor is, I don't know if it's here or if it's online, please, would love to know the identity of this mysterious sponsor, but so beautiful and so incredible. Good. I'll say with that, of course, we always dedicate our learning in the schus of our precious hostages, Mechel Baruch Hu, Hashem, bring them home, b'shalom and b'karov, in the schus of our holy soldiers, Mechel Baruch Hu, allow them to be successful by land, by sea, and by air, and the Meretz Hashem have tremendous hatzlach in accomplishing all of their objectives and to come home to their families. B'shalom and b'karov, and Meretz Baruch Hu, Meretz Hashem, give us decisive victory over all of our enemies, and Meretz Hashem usher in an era of peace and of shalom and hatzlach and bracha for all of Klal Yisrael, b'karov. I will say with that, let us begin. So I just have to share with you just something really beautiful. It's sometimes, you walk in, or sometimes you wake up in the morning and you just feel like a different kind of energy. So I don't know that if all of you felt it, but I felt it this morning. I couldn't sleep last night, and Baruch Hashem, just this morning, this palpable energy, like in the universe, that Klal Yisrael was starting Meseches Avoda Zara. There was just something so beautiful, and then something amazing happened. There was actually traffic on 7 Mile Lane this morning at 5:33 a.m. I was locked in an intersection with Rav Gedalia, deciding who's going to go first. Rav Matt is pulling out of his driveway. Tali Strum is already ahead of the pack over here. And at 5:35 in the parking lot, Baruch Hashem, I hear people talking. Like usually, it's too early to hear people talking at this hour. Right? Most people don't have enough energy. And beautiful and incredible. Just to see the energy, just to see the zrizus, just to see and to feel the palpable excitement. So I will say it was a tremendous zechus to be able to finish Meseches Shavuos and buckle your seatbelts. Just buckle your seatbelts, because what Avoda Zara is going to be, and just out of the gate, what it is something absolutely amazing, beautiful, and dramatic. And that excitement that we feel, that it's orus that we feel, the Avoda is to feel it every day. Because the truth is, it's the same excitement every day. It's the same zechus every single day. It's the same, you wake up in the morning and you say, I can't believe this is my life. Now, some people wake up in the morning and they're like, I can't believe this is my life. No, we're talking about like waking up in the morning and like, I can't believe that this is my life. I can't believe that I get to get out of bed in the morning, Baruch Hashem, and learn the most beautiful Torah in the world, to see on the Blat Gemara, to know that Baruch Hashem, I'm literally, again, measurably and incrementally closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to myself, to Klal Yisrael, because I embed myself in the holiest thing which exists in the universe, and that is the Torah Kedosha, and the feeling of privilege and the feeling of purpose that we have. Incredible. We'll say, Avoda Zara, Daf Beis Amud Aleph. Lifnei Ideyen, Sha'ovdei Kochavim. Here we go. So again, before the Yomim Tovim of the Ovdei Kochavim. So we'll say, so remember again, now we're going to see that Idehen, ultimately, we'll discuss the etymology of the word, but for our purposes today, what it means is Yom Tiv. Before the Yom Tovim of Ovdei Kochavim, Shloshi Yamim, for 3 days prior to the Yom Tov of Ovdei Kochavim, Asr Laseis V'Laseis Iman. You can't engage in any business dealings with them. No business dealings. The Gemara says, for example, Lashilon v'lishol mehen, you can't lend them something, you can't borrow something. Lahalvoson u'lahalvos mehen, to lend them, and ultimately again to borrow from them. That's so again, remember, lash'ilan v'lishal mehen she'ela, actually connection to yesterday's daf, we spoke about a shoel, right? So that's referring to like lending and borrowing stuff. L'halvos mehen means to lend money and to borrow money from them. Liparan ulithra mehen, to pay them back like an outstanding debt, or to collect payment for an outstanding debt. Now both say, what's going on over here? Take a look at Rashi. First Rashi in the Masechta. First Rashi. Rashi says over here, Rashi says, V'kulhu mishum da'azil u'model la'avodos kochavim biyom ido. The idea over here is that because these events are happening in close proximity to their Yom Tiv, that's a Yomi day means their Yom Tiv, their holiday. So because the event is happening in close proximity to their holiday, they will give thanks to their deity on the day of their Yom Tiv. So therefore, again, if I go ahead and I do business with an Oved Kochavim, right? So I go ahead and I seal a business deal with him 3 days in advance of his Yom Tiv, or I lend him money, or I borrow money, or I lend something, or I give something. So halacha l'maisa, the problem just is that is going to spark a sense of hoda, a sense of gratitude within the non-Jew, within the akum, and he's going to give hoda, he's going to give thanks to his deity on their Yom Tiv. So what's going on over here? Essentially, I'm kind of enabling or facilitating this enhanced sense of gratitude that the Oved Kochavim is going to have to his particular deity. And Halach L'Maisa, the Mishnah says, one should not do such a thing. Okay, incredible. They're both saying there is one point of contention on this last piece. So the Gemara said, the Mishnah says, Rabbi Huda says, Nifra'in mehen mivnei shemeitzer hulo. So this is incredible. So Rabbi Huda says, I agree with everything. The one thing you are allowed to do within 3 days before their Yom Tiv ultimately is what? You're allowed to go and collect payment from an akum. Why are you allowed to collect payments from an akum? Because having to pay something back ultimately again is painful, right? Nobody wants to pay back a debt, right? Nobody wants to have to go ahead and part with money. So you're allowed to collect payment. It is incredible. The Gemara says, Amrulo, they said to him, so the they is Rabban, the Tanakama. The Tanakama said to him, Afapi shemeitzehu achshav sameachu la'achar zman. Even though he is distressed now, right? Because anytime I have to part with money, I'm going to be distressed. But down the road, ultimately, again, he'll be happy. So because, again, at the end of the day, he's going to pay off the debt, he'll be happy later on. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, don't ask him even for payment of the debt within 3 days. So therefore, again, there is agreement on all parts of this Mishnah. So halacha l'maisa, within 3 days, which also is a tremendous Musar Haskell also. One of the major differences between the Jew and the Akum is where, in what area in life? In hachana, in preparation. How long does a Jew prepare before Yom Tiv for Yom Tiv? Right? Shloshim Yom Lifnei Achag, 30 days before the Yom Tiv, we already begin the halachas of the particular Yom Tiv. For a Jew understands hachana, preparation is key. If you want to be successful in life in anything, everything requires hachana. Tefillah, you want a meaningful tefillah experience. We know this. What does the Gemara, what does the Mishnah Maseches Bracha say? Chasidim Harishonim, the original pious ones would literally, again, contemplate, meditate for an hour before davening. Whether an hour means an hour, whether it means 10 minutes. What I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. What doesn't it mean? They weren't late. Because if you're late for something, already by definition, you're not involved. You're wherever you are, you're catch up, you're this, that. If you want something to be meaningful, you want davening to be meaningful, you have to be early. Everything requires hachana. You want a Yom Tiv to be early, or you want a Yom Tiv ultimately to be meaningful, it requires hachana. So the Hashem Tov makes an amazing observation. Actually, in last week's parsha, Baloscha es haneros. We're going to finish the blot, don't worry. Baloscha es haneros. It's just so much good stuff here. Baloscha es haneros. The Rambam says an incredible halacha by the menorah. The Rambam says that hadlakas ha-menorah, kindling the menorah, is kshira bizar. Even if a non-Kohen does the hadlaka, ultimately, again, the hadlaka is kosher. But amazingly enough, the halacha is that the hatavas haneros, the preparation of the wicks and the oil, has to be done by a Kohen. If it's done by a Yisrael, it's pasul. You hear this? The hadlaka itself, if it's done by a non-Kohen, kosher. But the hatava, the preparation of the menorah, has to be done by kohen. Zok the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. What do you see from here? The power of hachana, the power of preparation. Preparation creates the result. Preparation creates Kiddusha. Whatever you roll into in life is never going to be all that great. That's why I get over here. People think it's just an excuse to make a l'chaim, but that's why Torah Mel is so incredibly important also. Ain't a doma, a mincha, on Erev Shabbos, that you see, you sit down like a mensch, you had a little l'chaim with your chaverim, you had a little something to eat, you go in as a mensch, a davening, a shir. Both we know this, shir. The difference between coming 5 minutes late and 5 minutes early, it's all the difference in the world. Again, I'm settled, I'm there, I'm here. Again, obviously we all have different stuff and different things going on in life. But Lamaisa, the concept of hachana is everything. And the fundamental distinction between an akum and ultimately an yid, an akum, 3 days, a yid, 30 days. Because hachana makes or breaks. What you put into the preparation makes or breaks the effectiveness and the impact of any spiritual endeavor. Incredible. So in general, Tanna Kamma and Rabbi Yehuda are in agreement regarding everything in the Mishnah. So these are the activities you can't engage in within 3 days before the Yom Tov of the Avoda Zara, because for fear that you're going to enable or amplify the feeling of hakar satov, of gratitude that the akum has towards Avoda Zara, and we don't want that to happen. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says you could collect payment. That's the one thing you could do. Tanna Kamma says no, you can't even collect payment. Why? Because as much Rabbi Yehuda's logic is no one likes paying a debt. Tanna Kamma says, well, at the end of the day, as much as it is uncomfortable now, right? At the end of the day, so we've all had this. When you have to pay back a debt, it's uncomfortable. It hurts. There's a pinch in the short term, but there's a tremendous feeling of relief later on, right? When that debt is no longer there, you feel lighter, you feel better. I will say there's a tremendous Moser Haskell in this as well. This lashon of afal pishu meitzaru achshav sameachu la'achar zman. Even though something is distressing now, it'll cause you simcha later on, is a tremendous metaphor for life. There are many things that we want to accomplish and many things we want to do in life. The problem is they will result in some present discomfort. So because of that, we often refrain. Because we don't want to be uncomfortable, we don't want to be in a difficult situation. So if something is going to cause me present discomfort, often I'll shy away from it. The chap in life is that a person has to contemplate a little bit of present discomfort for long-term simcha. So sometimes those things that may cause me a little bit of discomfort right now will cause me such tremendous simcha, such tremendous growth in the future. Don't shy away from life opportunities because they create present discomfort if they have the ability to create long-term happiness. Deal with the present discomfort because know at the end of the day you're setting yourself up for tremendous life simcha. Incredible. And I will say, that's just the Mishnah. Just the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, here we go. Rabbi Shmuel, Tani Ideyan, V'chat Tani Idehen. Okay, so we'll say Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel. Now what's the Machlokes on? Interestingly enough, the Machlokes is how to spell the word. So again, remember, we translate without really knowing exactly what the word means. We translated it based on Rashi, right? So again, Idehen means their Yom Tov, their day of celebration. But we'll have to see what exactly is the actual etymological root of the word Idehen. So Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel, one said Idehen with an aleph, one said Idehen with an ayin. So here we go. Man detani Idehen lo mishtabish, uman detani Idehen lo mishtabish. First white line. Here's the good news. Whichever spelling you like, you're good. You're good. Right? At the end of the day, you want Idain with an aleph, Idain with an ayin. It's okay. So let's both say, so what's the etymological root? Here we go. First white line. Man ditani Idain lo mishtabish dichsiv ki karov yom idam. So we'll say, interestingly enough, so the pasuk over here, quoting from Devarim, right? So we'll say, so just to understand, the pasuk in its entirety is Lina kam b'shilam le'is tamutz raglam ki karov yom edam v'chash atidos lamo. It's talking about Ovdei Avoda Zara, those who worship idolatry. Ki karov yom edam means the day of their destruction is near. So therefore, again, the Gemara calls the Yamim Tovim of Avoda Zara Idehen. So it's interesting. It means a Yom Tov. In other words, we're using it to mean a Yom Tov, but it means really the days of their destruction. Because the more the Ovdei Avoda Zara celebrate and worship their Avoda Zara, the more that creates their own personalistic undoing. Okay, so that's the Aleph. Oman detani idehen lo mishtabish. The one who says Idein with an ayin also is not mistaken. What does it mean? Dichsiv, Yitnu Ideihem v'yitzdakus. Quotes over here the pasuk from Yeshaya, which literally means, let them bring their testimony and righteousize them. I'll just write that word, right? Righteousize them. All right, and I was say, what does that mean? So here, the Navi is giving most cloudy. So I saying, listen, if you want to be an Ovid Avoda Zara, be an Ovid Avoda Zara. Just make sure that when you're brought to trial before God, that your Avoda Zara is going to come and stick up for you. Right? So again, both of them are used in the context of Avoda Zara. So either Ideyan with an aleph, representing destruction, so the Yom Tovim are called days of destruction, or ultimately Ideyan with an aleph, representing this idea that their Avoda Zara is called their witnesses, because whenever this judgment takes place, which we're going to see, whether it is this day of divine judgment, we hope that the Avoda Zara shows up and testifies on behalf of those who are worshiping it, which of course won't happen. So it's a metaphoric foreshadow about the embarrassment that of the Avoda Zara are ultimately going to face. Incredible. Incredible. So the Gemara says as follows: Uman de Toni Ideyan, my time alotani Ideyan. So I will say, so why does the Aleph Chevra not agree with the Ayin Chevra? The Gemara says, Amar Lecha Tavra Adif. Because again, literally Tavra means like to deconstruct or to curse. Because again, if we in general, whenever we refer to Avoda Zara, we like to refer to it in disparaging terms. So therefore, we'd rather use Aleph, because Aleph means destruction. Aleph means destruction. Yomi there with an aleph. Umad tani idehen. My time alone tani idehen. And the one who goes, why doesn't the ayin chevra side with the aleph chevra? Amrlecha man kagarim luhu tavra edus sheidu biatzman hilchach edus adifa. Because they'll say like this: we agree with the idehen with an aleph. But what ultimately causes the destruction? What causes the destruction of the Avoda Zara? Literally, again, their own self-incriminating testimony. The idea over here that the testimony of their actions, i.e., I will say, the greatest testimony is the way you lived your life, right? The greatest testimony is the video of your life. That's my testimony. So ultimately, for the Avoda Zara, the Avoda Zara itself is going to be the testimony that damns them, that damages them, that deconstructs them. Therefore, they'd rather go with the ayin. So Gemara says, v'hai. Yitnu ideihem v'yitztiku b'ovdei kochavim ksiv. Okay, so I'll say, so now the Gemara raises a problem. Now, we wouldn't know this problem for one simple reason. We don't know Navi. So because you don't know Navi, the first time most of us ever saw this pasuk in Yeshaya was about 30 seconds ago, right? So Lamaisa, the Gemara does know Navi, right? So the Gemara says, but one second, they should bring their witnesses and exonerate them. The Gemara says, that's not talking about of the Avoda Zara, that's actually talking about Jews. Suppose I get ready for this. Now, and by the way, not only that, it's actually a positive statement. What's the positive statement? Or once I get ready for this, the Rabbi Shmuel Levi, Kol mitzvos sheYisrael osim ba'olam hazeh. Just take this in. All mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael does in this world, ba'os u'me'idos lahem li'olam haba, will come and testify on our behalf in the world to come. Shene'emar yitnu ideyem v'yitztiku. Because what does the pasuk say? Literally, let them bring their witnesses and exonerate them or justicize them, right? So we'll say, so who is that referring to? Elu Yisrael. That refers ultimately again to Klal Yisrael. So therefore the Gemara says, here's the problem. The pasuk that you're quoting, that the Ayin Chevra is quoting, is actually not a pasuk that's about the condemnation of the Avoda Zara. But in fact, it's about the exoneration and ultimately, again, the solidifying of the tzidkus status of Klal Yisrael. Because what does it mean at the end of the day? At the end of the day, yitnu idei v'yitztiku, Rabbi Shmuel Levi, every single mitzvah that you do in this world, ultimately, again, comes before you in the world to come. Right? Again, I'm sorry. Ba'os u'me'idos lam le'olam haba. We'll say, we're going to come back to that in just a second. When it says, Yishmu'u v'yomru emes, then the pasuk goes on. It says, they will hear and they will say truth. In other words, there's two things happening over here. There's Klal Yisrael having their mitzvos testify on their behalf. And then ultimately, again, there's other people hearing and saying emes. Who are the other people hearing and saying emes? Elu ovdei kochavim. That ultimately, again, refers to the idolater. So we'll say, so you see what's happening over here in Olam Haba? in Olam Haba. So again, the Jews, Baruch Hashem, are zocha to have all of their mitzvos come before them and ultimately testify on their behalf. On the other hand, there's the Avoda Zara, recognizing the folly of their ways, recognizing again the theological emptiness of everything that they did. So what do the Avoda Zara do? They say Yishmu v'yomru emes. They will hear and they will say that's emes. That's emes. For our purposes, ultimately, what do you see from here? That the idehen, that ultimately, again, the ayin is halacha l'maisa, again, talking about, the pasuk of idehen is talking about Jews. It's not talking about non-Jews. So what's going on over here? It's not talking about an akum. The Gemara says, Ela amar Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua, man da amar idehen mehacha. So ultimately, again, Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua says, you're right. The one who says idehen, he brings it from a different pasuk. What pasuk? Yotzrei pasal kulam tohu v'chamudehem bal yo'ilu ve'edehem hema. So he's quoting over here the pasuk, once again from Yeshaya. That literally translated again, those who fashion idols. Kulam tohu. Ultimately, again, their entirety is emptiness. V'chamudehem bal yo'ilu, that which they desire will never come to fruition. Ve'edeyen hema, and ultimately, again, their witnesses, their very witnesses, are these very idols that they create. So that's where the ayin, that's where the ideyim ultimately comes from. I will say, just before we go back to some ridiculously overwhelming and amazing Gemara, I just want to spend a moment on this Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi, because it's a very, very, very beautiful Gemara. That kol mitzvos she'Yisrael osim ba'olam hazeh, any mitzvah we do in this world, ultimately again, ba'os u'mi'idos lahem li'olam haba, come and testify on our behalf in the world to come. So there is a beautiful Marsha. The Marsha says like this. I just want to read to you the first line of the Marsha. He says, Ha'inyan, get ready for this, Kemo shekasav ha'mikubalim. It's very interesting. I don't know that the Marsha often has that lashon. So he says the inyan is like the mikubalim, right? Ki b'chol ma'aseh yedei adam nivra davar ruchni lefi ha'maisa. Every mitzvah we do, ultimately, says the Marsha, creates a davar ruchni, creates a new spiritual reality. Kimo shakasav sha'osa mitzvah no seikov pamal yashamala v'chein behepech v'osa ha'avera matish kochav pamal yashamala v'no seikov letzat hatuma. So I'll say similarly again, when a person does an avera, I create a negative spiritual reality. V'heim edim ha'mi'idin alav. Well, say, why am I sharing this with you? You know, sometimes little children are taught that when you do a mitzvah, you create a good malach, right? You do an avera, you create a bad malach, and sometimes as parents say, oh, that's very nice. Absolutely no idea what that means, right? Or where this Mora pulled that out of, right? But Lamaisa, it's true. It's true. When I do a mitzvah, I create a brand new spiritual energy in this world. When I do an avera, I create a negative spiritual energy in this world. I create realities through my mitzvos and averos. And it is those realities, ultimately, that not only shape my life in this world, but are also there to greet me after 120. And I will say, our actions matter, and our actions literally, again, create realities in this world and the next. So often, the reason why we commit averos, it's not because of taiva, it's not because of, again, okay, we all have taivas, right? But there's a lot of taivas that I have that I don't act on, right? So how is it that some taivas I do act on, some taivas I don't act on? I think there's a very simple math. Because at the end of the day, I think that my actions don't really matter. I think I could do whatever I want to do. And again, I understand I'm going to have to do tshuva. I understand maybe there's malchus, so there's misa, there's kares. Okay, but lamaisa, it doesn't matter in the world, right? It doesn't have an implication in the world. And Rabbi Shmuel Levi says, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Every single thing I do in this world ultimately creates that brand new energy that did not exist before. And that energy shapes my life here in this world. And those energies, so to speak, those results are waiting for me in the world to come as well. There is no such thing as an insignificant action. Everything we do, says the Marsha, look at this lashon again. Kim b'chol ma'aseh yedei adam nivra davar ruchni lefi ha'maisa. every single thing that I do, I create a davar ruchni. I create the spiritual energy. What is that? I don't know. Is that a malach? Is that something else? I have no idea. All I know is that my actions matter. My actions have results in this world and the next. And Rabosai, this should hopefully condition us to live life with a heightened sense of awareness. Rabosai, now you understand. By the way, why is it? What is the first section in Mesilas Yesharim? The first section of Mesilas Yesharim. First section, we learned it 4 times together, right? Zihirus. Zihirus. What's Zihirus? What's Zihirus? Alacrity. Oh, I see we have to chazer. Okay, fine. We'll do it a 5th time, right? So, say alacrity, awareness, right? Zihirus ultimately, again, no, Zrizus comes afterwards. Zihirus is the first thing. Right? And is ultimately, again, right? Watchfulness, alacrity, right? Ultimately, again, to live life. Remember the Ramchal's mashal? His mashal is that like life is like walking on the side of a cliff. And if you close your eyes for a second, you fall off the side. You fall off the side. So why? Why do I have to be so watchful in life? It's because of Rabbi Shmuel ben Levi. Because at the end of the day, my actions matter. So because my actions matter, I got to be on guard. I got to be plugged in. I have to be aware. Because otherwise, I'm doing things that create results. And those results may have intended or unintended consequences. Incredible. I will say, incredible. All right, here we go. Dar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, get ready. Get ready for this because this is going to be the most incredible Gemara you've ever seen in your life, or at least this morning. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa. Jose, just take a second for it. Just do you understand like what it is that we're doing and what it is that we have the schus to do? Jose, Avoda Zara could be your mesechta. Right? So to be honest, like I'm not going to ask how much chazara besides Zevi was happening over the course of Shavuos. Right? Because sometimes like you get like into a rut with a Masechta and you're like, all right, I already don't know most of it, so whatever. This is a brand new Masechta. This is a brand new Masechta right here. This is a brand new Masechta, right? Right? Sorry? Nice, right? This is a brand new Masechta. Just like, make this yours. Make this yours. Make it that when someone asks you who your best friend in life is, you say Avoda Zara. Now, it might sound a little bit strange at first, and I will say, but just understand, like anything and everything you need to be successful in life is probably going to be contained in the next page, but certainly over the next pages in life. I will say, it's an overwhelming opportunity that we have in front of us. Let's go. So it says, Dar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, V'yitim Rabbi Smaloi. Here we go. La'asid lavo, mevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Sefer Torah b'cheiko. Ultimately, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings it, listen to this, both, and the Asid Lavo. Now, both, if you remember again from our Sanhedrin days, from Parak Chelek days, the Asid Lavo can mean a lot of different things. The Pashtus over here is talking about Messianic era. Messianic era. In the Messianic era, HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds the Sefer Torah, Umanicho b'cheiko, he holds it against his chest, V'omer, L'mi sha'asak ba, Yava v'yital scharo. Wow. The Moshe stands with the Sefer Torah by his chest, and he cries out and he says, whoever has engaged in this, misha'asak bo, right? We'll say iskus. Iskus means to be actively involved. Whoever learned this Torah, whoever lived this Torah, come and take your schar. Now, we'll say it's interesting to note why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. First, obviously, the whole thing is anthropomorphic, right? Obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have arms, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have a chest, right? So the Maisa, but what does it mean? It's interesting. You would have thought that it just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes ahead and holds the Sefer Torah. And he goes ahead and he says, whoever learned this Torah, come and reap your reward. But what does it say? It says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sefer Torah b'cheiko. He holds it against his chest because I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hinting to us as follows. Do you know what both say? Who reaps the maximum benefit from the reward? There's 2 ways to learn Torah. 2 ways to learn Torah. You could learn Torah like this, or you could learn Torah like this. You could go ahead and learn Torah as an intellectual pursuit and go ahead and absorb all the different pieces of information and learn different things, but your relationship with Torah is always at an arm's length. Or you could allow the words of Torah to seep into your heart. You could allow Torah to fundamentally change you and uplift you. Do you learn Torah by holding it in your hands? Or do you learn Torah by bringing it into your heart? HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Messianic era doesn't hold the Sefer Torah up like this. He holds the Sefer Torah against his heart, against his chest. And he says, whoever learned Hartzig Torah, whoever learned Torah with hearts, with a heart, right? Whoever inculcated himself, brought that Torah in, that's a person who reaps the maximum benefit to Torah. Don't learn Torah held up high. Learn Torah held close. Incredible. So what happens? Listen to this scene. Miyad miskapsin uban of the goham be'erbuvya. So what happens? All of the nations of the world go ahead and come now. We'll say be'erbuvya. What does erbuvya mean? They're all mixed up. Right? So the nations of the world, so obviously what's happening over here, there's a panic, right? There's a global panic. Why is there a global panic? Because at the end of the day, they recognize that they did not lead lives steeped in Torah. Now, by the way, not that they're obligated to learn Torah. We'll get to exactly what this means. But the point is, all the nations of the world rush in to try to get before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what happens? Shne'emar kalagayim nikbitzu yachtov. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al tikansu lefanai be'ervuvya. HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls out, he says, Chevra, I'm talking to the nations of the world, not us. Don't come before me be'ervuvya. Don't come before me all mixed up. Ella tzikanis kol umma v'umma. Amid beis. Rather, every nation with its scholars has to come on its own. The nations will gather. La'om means monarchy. One monarchy will serve another. Yaakov and Esav. Shabbos say, I just point out over here. First of all, Mazel Tov on finishing our first Amid, right? If this was an Amid Yomi Shir, we would have finished early. Right? Baruch Hashem. So now, incredible. What does this mean, by the way? Just this line. So the Gemara says, Chash Baruch Hu says, don't come before me be'ervuvya. Don't come before me ultimately again all mixed up. What does the Gemara say? I think that there's a tremendous yesod in this statement. I don't know Chash Baruch Hu. I'll to cancel be'ervuvya. Chash Baruch Hu says, I just want to tell you, you cannot get close to me if you're all mixed up. Closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu requires seder, requires order. You want a relationship with God? There has to be a seder in your life. There has to be order in your life. That order means a schedule, like the Piaget's always speaks about, this idea of being a scheduled person, knowing how I'm spending my time, knowing how I'm spending my day. That Seder means, ultimately, again, I have goals, I have aspirations, I have a methodical way in which I live my life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if you're living be'erbuvya, if you're just all over the place all of the time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Al tukansu lefanai. I'm just telling you, you're not going to make it before me. Because in order to go ahead and come before me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says there has to be Seder. Rabbi say the greatest raya to this, right, on the holiest day of the year is Yom Kippur. Rabbi say if there is one thing that you could find on the Seder of Yom Kippur, it is, right, on the Avoda of Yom Kippur, it is Seder. Everything is highly choreographed, right, from where you go, from what you wear, from who's involved, from what's done. There is no time, there is no unstructured time in the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Kippur. Why? Because Kedusha requires structure. Kedusha requires order. Kedusha requires strict scheduling. And the more Kedusha you want, the more scheduled, worked out, and thought out you need to be. Because I will say, if I'm an erbuvya yid, right, or as they say in Latin, tzefleigen, right? You know, right? If I'm tzefleigen, I am, and there are people who go through life tzefleigen, and they accomplish some things, right, episodically, but they don't really move the needle in their own personalistic accomplishment. If you're all over the place, pretty much you get nowhere. Chadosh Baruch Hu says, if you're erbuvya, you can't come close to me. But if you have seder, if you have order, if you have schedule, if you have planning, then ultimately you come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible. The Bible says, it says the Gemara, Amud Beis, Omi Iker Erbuvya Kami HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Is there Erbuvya? It sounds strange, right? Is there like a Erbuvya before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Moshe wants to be concerned about Erbuvya. To which the Gemara says, Ella, the Gemara says, of course not. Or, this is not a problem for Hashem, but rather, again, it's a problem for the nations. House is very interesting. Ella, Ki dilo le'ervu enu b'hadi adadi. Ultimately, again, the Gemara says, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing for the benefit of the nations of the world. Rashi points out over here something amazing. Rashi says, if all the nations are mixed together, because we're going to see what's going to end up happening is, each nation tries to plead its case before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So ultimately, the Ribbon Shalom was concerned that if everybody is mixed up, people are going to get their claims mixed up as well, right? They're not going to be able to properly forge their national defenses. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says each nation should come on its own. Rashi says, "To lo l'arvenu inu lididei lo mahanyer b'ervuvia, aval lidido mahanyer buvia demababali umisastemi ta'anasehem." For HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ervuvia doesn't matter, right? But l'mais again for the nations of the world, for the nations, it's good for them to each come as a nation so that they can organize their defense together and not get mixed up on what the other nations are saying. All right, Rabbi say, get ready for this. Who comes in first? Miyad. The Rabbi say this is for judgment during the messianic era. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu's held his Sefer Torah by his chest. He says, whoever has come and observed what is written in here, go ahead and come and collect your reward. The nations of the world realize, we're in trouble. They come to lobby their case before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who comes in first? Miyad nichnas alfana malchus Romi tchila. Rome comes in first. Rome comes in first. My taima, mishum de chashiva, because Rome is important. Rome is important. So the Gemara says, fine, the Gemara says, my time should the chashiva, how do you know that Rome is important? Because the Pasuk says by Daniel that when referring to Rome, they consumed the entire land, they plowed it, and they destroyed it. Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Zu Romi chayaves. This is Rabbi Yochanan, who says that, again, this refers to Rome, literally, again, the wicked Rome, or the liable Rome, whose tiva, who's literally, again, their teva, in other words, their impact has spread upon the entire world. And I will say that it's true to this very day, right? It's true to this very day. Their impact has spread to the entire world. So in general, how do we know that he who is chashav goes first? He was, so again, so now here's what we've got, right? Rome, nation Rome, is coming in for judgment in the messianic era. And I will say, by the way, just to understand the messianic era, it's Rome and it's all of its derivatives. It's all of its derivatives. Like, for example, the Gemara says in Maseches Megillah, there are many nations that were derivative of Rome. Germania, right? The Gemara Maseches Megillah says, which I guess by Pashtus we translate as Germany, right? Germania is a derivative of Rome. So when it's Rome coming before judgment for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Messianic era, it's Rome, it's the empire of Rome and its derivatives. So the Gemara says, now by the way, so now we're saying Rome is the most important, therefore Rome comes in first for judgment. So the Gemara says, by the way, how do you know that the more chashiv entity goes first? The Gemara says, Kidrav Chista, don't know Chista, listen to this. Melech v'tzibor, melech nichnas tchila ledin. So this is very interesting. If the Sanhedrin has to adjudicate two cases, right? The king and the tzibor, ultimately, again, the king goes in first for judgment. Nichnas tchila, right? Now, by the way, although it sounds like Sanhedrin over here, it's not really Sanhedrin, right? Because remember, we saw, by the way, we saw this in Shavuos also, that a king is usually, again, not judged by the court. But again, just for the metaphor. So melech v'tzir melech nichnas tchil ledin. So ultimately, again, if the king is waiting for judgment, and ultimately, again, the tzibor is waiting for judgment, the king goes in first. That's why Rashi points out nichnas tchila lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ledin. Okay, so the king goes in first for judgment. Shnei amar Lasos mishpat avdo or mishpat amo Yisrael. So both say this is very interesting. So the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Malachim, and the pasuk says, Lasos mishpat avdo or mishpat amo. Hashem performs the judgment of his servant and the judgment of his nation. Servant meaning the king, and then his nation. What do you see from here? The king is judged first, and then the nation. Says the Gemara, the time amai. So why is that? So again, so now we've shown from the pasuk that halacha l'maisa, again, the king is judged before the nation, which again, for our purposes, means the more chashiv person is judged first. But ultimately, why is the king judged before the nation? So the Gemara said, so one possibility is, if you could imagine, like in the waiting room, so it's not appropriate to have the king in the waiting room, right? So therefore, again, because it's not proper to make the king wait, therefore, halacha l'maisa, or literally, again, it means it's not appropriate, it's not normative behavior to keep the king on the outside. Therefore, we take the king's case first, adjudicate him, and then adjudicate the nation. The other possibility is that we want the king judged first. Why? Because if the nation is judged first, again, this is all by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If the nation is judged first, the Ribono Shel Olam's wrath may be kindled over the nation, and therefore he may come down harder on the king. Therefore, again, in order that the king kind of gets a little bit of a lighter side, so to speak, of the Ribono Shel Olam's Midas Hadin, we let him go first in judgment. If you look at Rashi, the Leifa Shcharin Av Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mipnei Pishet Tzibor Shemachas V'Shalom Yifram Min HaMelech Kol Serchono Mipnei Acharon. Okay, so I'll say, so two reasons as to why we let the king go first. Either because, again, it's not appropriate to keep the king waiting on the outside, or second possibility is we don't want the king to have to deal with divine judgment in the aftermath of his wrath with Klal Yisrael. If he's provoked with Klal Yisrael, we don't have to see that. Good. So therefore, what do we, just to follow what we have over here, right? We're talking about messianic era. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is judging the nations of the world, right? The nations line up be'erbuvia. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Chevra, separate out into nations. Who comes first? Rome. Why does Rome come first? Because they're most chashuv. Who cares? Because that he who is important always goes first. Where do we see that? Melech v'tzibor. Melech goes first for adjudication. I'll just tell you this line. Lav orach ara lemesav malka me'avrai. It's such a beautiful line. I will say it is not normal that the king should be on the outside. So I will say, such a beautiful yesod for our own relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes, either knowingly or unknowingly, we keep HaKadosh Baruch Hu at a distance. Whatever it is, we have commitment issues, we have fear, maybe we're not confident enough that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to love us, going to accept us for who and what we are. So we create a little bit of an arm's length relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. The Gemara says, don't do it. Lav arach ara lemesav malka me'avroi. It's not nice to keep the king, to keep HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the outside. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu into your life. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu into your soul. He's in there anyway, right? He knows what's going on anyway. He knows what I'm doing, whether I choose to have a relationship with him or not. Don't keep him at arm's length. Sometimes, again, we're so afraid because of our own inconsistencies and because of our own averos, which we all have. We all have inconsistencies. We all have inherent contradictions. We all commit averos. And we think that because of those things, I'm not fit for a close and meaningful relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it's simply not true. At the end of the day, all the king wants is to let him in. All he wants is to let him in. All he wants is not a seat at the table. All he wants is to pull up a chair next to me in my heart. Don't keep HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the outside. Let him in. It's the same Yisur. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes a Sefer Torah and he brings it to his heart. Says, Chavra, this is what I want. Don't keep my Torah out here. Bring it inside your heart. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, don't keep me on the outside either. Bring me in. Incredible. All right, Avoda, so what happens? Here we go. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Maya Saktim, Hashem says to Rome, Chevra, Roman Chevra, tell me, what did you spend your life with here in this world? Good, I want to tell you. We're very proud of what we've done. We established marketplaces. Bathhouses. Oh, we proliferated wealth in this world. V'kulam, get ready for this one. V'kulam lo asinu ela b'shvil Yisrael kadesh yisasku b'Torah. And God, do you know why we did it? Now I want to tell you, not to brag, but we did it for the chosen people. We did it for Klal Yisrael, right? Everything for Klal Yisrael. Why? Because we figured that if we make the Gashmius easier, Klal Yisrael will have an easier time learning Torah. So we built these beautiful marketplaces and bathhouses and created wealth. So wealth was accessible. Bathhouse, all this stuff. So Klal Yisrael shouldn't have to worry about their Gashmius. This way, again, Baruch Hashem, they can focus on the Ruchnius. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shotim Sheba Olam. Moshe says, I could deal with a lot of stuff. What I can't deal is with liars. Don't lie to God. You want to sin? Geg is unto hate. I mean, not exactly, but you understand, right? You want to sin? Go ahead, right? We're all going to sin anyway, right? Don't be dishonest for the one simple reason. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees through it even before you finished the sentence. So here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Rome, and I'm about to say this is the most Haskell, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to them, you fools. Gemara says, that is not true. Whatever you did for you. Takantem shokim. You know why you set up marketplaces? Because you wanted to create a place for the harlots. Right? You wanted a place of prostitution. Bathhouses because you're hedonistic people. You think you created wealth? Shalihu, I create wealth. Shene'emar, liya kesef, v'liazav noam Hashem tzavakos. So ultimately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives it to Rome. Gives it to Rome. He says, Rome, how dare you? They will say, by the way, you hear them trying this Musar Haskell? What should Rome have done? What should they have done? What should they have done? Just own it. Just own it. We messed up. We messed up bad. We messed up bad. We messed up really, really bad. But instead, it will say it's incredible. They doubled down on their issues. Not only did they double down, the chutzpah to say that what they did for us. What they did for us. How much Jewish blood Rome and its descendants have on their hands. How much persecution Rome and their descendants have on their hands. And the chutzpah to stand before the Ribono Shel Olam and the Moshe Mashiach and say, everything we did for Klal Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm sorry, Chavra, for that I have no patience. You want to tell me you messed up, we could work together. But you want to lie to me? You want to lie to me and say that what you did for the Jewish people? Sorry, nothing doing. Me, the Gemara says, Klum yesh bachem magid zos. Is there anyone amongst you, ultimately, again, magid zos, who could go ahead and has gotten involved in zos, in this, what's this? Shneimar, mi bachem yagid zos, ve'ein zos ela Torah. What's zos? Zos is Torah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks Rome, is there anyone in your nation who has learned Torah? Now, the Gemara is going to ask, I don't understand. Rome doesn't have an obligation to learn Torah. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to ask? That's tomorrow's daf. Shneimar, v'zos ha-Torah shesam Moshe, miyad yatzu v'pachi nefesh. Rome leaves. Rome leaves dejected. Right? Why? Why does Rome leave dejected? And rightfully so, because they have been indicted in divine messianic judgment. Right? They've been found guilty in divine messianic judgment. Incredible. Who's next? Yatsa Malchus Rome, get ready for this. V'nichnas Malchus Paras. Oh, say who's number two? Who's number two? Get ready for this. Persia. Persia comes in number two after Rome. Get ready for this. The Gemara says, my timer. Now, why is Persia number two? The Chashiva Basra. Because after Rome, Persia was the second most influential empire. Minalan Dichsiv Va'aru Chiyua Acharibos. This is the prophecy of Daniel. So in Daniel's prophecy, again, he says, and afterwards there was a second animal. Va'achu Chiriachare Tanina Dam Yoladov. And this second animal in Daniel's vision, right? The first one resembled the lion, which was Rome. The second one resembled the bear. And who's the bear? Vitani Rav Yosef, Ela Parsim. This refers to the Persians, right? What's unique about the Persians? Sha'ochlin v'shosin kidov. They drink and they eat like bears, which means they eat and drink a lot. Umisrbalim basar kidov, and they're covered with hair, hairy people, like the bear. Umegadlin seyar, basar kidov. They're big people. They're big people, literally covered with flesh, like the bear. Umegadlin seyar kidov. And ultimately, again, they're covered with hair, like a bear. Ve'in lahem menucha kidov. And ultimately, again, like the bear, which is a generally restless animal, right? Because it hibernates, but when it's not hibernating, it's generally restless. So ultimately, again, they're restless like the bear as well. Okay, so now Persia's in for judgment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, tell me, what did you do? Now, I just want to point out, here's the gadlus. You say to yourself, why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu asking the questions? Hashem knows exactly what they've done. It's no different than when HaKadosh Baruch Hu confronts Cain, and he says to Cain, right, Ei Hevel achicha, where's Hevel? Right? Or he asks Adam Arishon, Adam, tell me, Adam, what have you been up to? See, HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything. But when we've messed up in life, he gives us the opportunity to own it and to do tshuva. The problem is 9 out of 10 times we just double down. See, Hashem is saying to Persia, Shefala, tell me, what have you been up to? Right? What have you done? Persia says, I'll tell you. We made bridges. We conquered cities. We made many wars. Yes, you have. Lo asinu ela b'shvil Yisrael kedei she'yis'asku b'Torah. And Persia says, Chash Baruch Hu, I just want you to know, everything that we have done, we only did for Klal Yisrael. All these things, all of the conquering and all of the bridges and everything we did was to enhance our financial holdings, our material holdings. This way, again, more Gashmios was available to Klal Yisrael, and therefore they could learn Torah, and again, in a more comfortable way. Incredible. Stop it. That is not true. You know anything and everything you've done, you've only done ultimately, again, in a self-serving way. You know why you built bridges? So you could collect tolls. right? Krachim, you conquered cities. Lasos bahem Angaria, you conquered cities in order to create vassal cities, right? So again, Rashi points out here, Angaria, Avoda, Samelach, Hamutelas, Al Yoshe Krachim, Lasos Muchamos, Velito behem Damavodasa. You conquered cities in order to go in and create vassal cities. So you could seize people for the army, seize animals for the tax for the king. That's why you did it. Milchamos, wars, you think you created victory in war? Ania Sisi. Just like Baruch Hu tells the Romans, you think you created wealth? Liya Kesef, Belia Zav, money belongs to me. He says to Persia, you think you're in charge? Well, see, if you understand the profundity of these words, you think Persia, Iran, you think Persia, you make the wars? You think you're the one who does the wars? Man doesn't choreograph wars. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I choreograph wars. Ani asisim shnei amar, Hashem ish milchama. Kadosh Baruch Hu is the man of war. Right? You think Persia, you think you're in charge of where the missiles go? You think you're in charge of what happens? Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I am the ish milchama. I am the ish milchama. The Gemara says, Klum yesh bachem magizos. Ultimately, again, is there anyone amongst you? Now, again, once again, Baruch Hu asks Persia, he says, is there anyone amongst you who's learned Torah? Now, again, I will say, the question is still strange, because why should Persia have anyone amongst them who's learning? We'll have to see what that means. Shnei amar, mi bachem yagidzos, ve'in zos el Torah. Shnei amar, ve'zos tar asher samosha. Now, obviously, there's no one in their midst who's learned Torah. Therefore, miyad yotzu milafana b'pachin nefesh. Persia goes out dejected. So Rome's done, Persia's done, all dejected. So then we're going to ask an interesting question. Persia, after you saw what happened to Rome, you would say, you know what, we're going to pass on this. You know what, thank you, God. You know, it's not really worth it. Why did Persia choose to go through? And I will say, and by the way, not only that, but they advanced the same type of argument, right? In other words, they saw what happened to Rome. They heard how the argument fell flat, yet they went in for judgment and pretty much advanced the same argument. Amar, Enu Sasya Beis HaMikdash va'anan binyanan. So this is a good taina. Persia said, look, here's the big difference between us and Rome. Rome destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. We didn't, right? We built it. Now, what does it mean we built it? I will say, so again, because remember, Esther's son, Koresh, right? Esther's son with Achashverosh, who was Persia, Parasumada, Persian Median Empire, they did rebuild the second temple. So Persia felt like, look, at the end of the day, we did do something for the Jewish people. We helped to rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash. So they thought that would help them in their taina. Incredible. The Gemara says, V'chein l'chol umma v'umma. So ultimately, again, this is the scene that repeats itself with every single nation. So nation after nation comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rebbe Shalom says, what did you do? They advance their accomplishments, they claim everything they did for Klal Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, not true. What you've done is self-serving. So the Gemara says, so if all the other nations saw that it didn't work for Rome and for Persia, why do these other nations keep coming in for divine judgment? Hanoch ishtabadu b'Yisrael va'anan lo shabadnu b'Yisrael. So the other nations say like this, listen, Rome and Persia were the primary persecutors of Klal Yisrael. So therefore, again, I get it, why HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not going to find any type of exoneration for them. But a lot of other nations in the world, didn't per se participate in the active persecution of Klal Yisrael. So they were hoping to find some type of positive judgment. So I'm supposed to get ready for this. My shna, I'm going to end with this line. Well, not really. But my shna, hani de chashivi, or my shna hani de lo chashivi. So what is it that makes Rome and Persia so important more than the other nations of the world? What is it that makes them more important? So the Gemara says, there was a Mishum Hana the Hanach Mashchi b'malchusayhu ad da'asim mishicha. Why, Rabbi saying? Because Rome and Persia, right, those empires will last all the way until the messianic era. So Rabbi say, now again, obviously, what it also means is in the form of influence, right? Obviously, the empires are not constituted as they once were, but at the end of the day, the influence of these empires will be felt until the messianic era. In other words, many other nations come and go, and their influence is gone. So what's unique about Rome and Persia is that their influence in the world is felt up until the messianic era. So Rabbi say, so I just want to point out, just to understand what this means, right? So Persia, which again is Iran and the Chevra, right? So Lamaisa, again, their influence is felt in the world until Mashiach, which means that if we see their influence being diminished, and if we see their influence being compromised, and we see their ability to threaten not only Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael, but the entire world being diminished day after day, you know what that tells us? You know what that tells us? That the Yemos HaMashiach is closer than ever. Because the Gemara says, Persia, Paras, will be here up until Yemos HaMashiach. And if we are literally living in days where day after day, strike after strike, Am Yisrael is diminishing the influence of Paras actively, it means that Mashiach is not right around the corner, but it probably means Mashiach is right at the front door. It's not me, it's Avoda Zara, Daf Beis Amud Beis. 1 week into this new stage of the war, exactly a little bit more than 1 week, right? Last Thursday night. And here the Gemara is telling us, great things are about to happen. Incredible things are about to happen. Paras will be here until Mashiach comes. But as you begin to see their influence being diminished, just know that great things are waiting for Klal Yisrael. Great things are waiting for the world. That will say very soon, that day, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds that Sefer Torah, not in his hands, but by his heart, and says, whoever throughout the ages toiled in a labor of love to uphold, to learn, and to live this beautiful scroll, come and receive your reward. That reward for our people, that reward for our nation, that reward for all of humanity, Meretz Hashem, is coming very soon. I will say, Shkoyach, and Daf Beis Avoda Zara, absolutely amazing haskalah, incredible, incredible. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day, everyone. Shkoyach. Shkoyach, Chevron Eretz Yisrael. A good Erev Shabbos. It should be a Shabbos in Meretz Hashem of safety, of security, of Besoros Tovos, for all of Klal Yisrael and Halavai. We should see the downfall of Paras, Mehira B'Yamin.